Hey, welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, and this week a special guest and someone who flew in from Florida to attend the battle at the Boneyard on Friday. Andrew Ivins, 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting. Is that the correct title? Has it changed? I feel like it's changed since last time.
No, that is the title, the man in charge of the rankings. I think
The
that
guy
should
that people
accompany
can
it.
tweet at and yell at, right? Like that's officially what it is for you. You're the big balloon for everybody else to
Yeah, and when we
take
get
on
it
the.
right, it's easy. I don't think anyone's happy with the ranking. Last year, Bryce Underwood, the number one player in the country, Michigan fans didn't think he was ranked high enough. I'm like, guys, he is number one overall here. So
Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to find a way to put a guy at zero, but if there's a fan base that would want it, I'm not surprised it'd be Michigan. So, got that going for him. All right, so Andrew is up here along with Tom Loy at the Battle at the Boneyard. Michael Bruntz was there as well, and Andrew, we want to dive into kind of what you learned, get an outside perspective of what you thought of this event, some of the talent that was at the event. Nebraska commit Trae Taylor, who looked like he put on a show. As someone who was following along on Twitter, seemed like Trae Taylor was everywhere on Friday, and his passes were always on the money. So we'll dive into all of that here, and I guess let's just start with just sort of an overview of what you thought this might be, and then ultimately what it was when you were up here over the weekend.
yeah, our guys at Adidas, some people I'm kind of connected to there with the grassroots, they hit me up, I think 2 months ago and said, hey, Nebraska is going to do this event. They're getting club teams to Lincoln. We'd love to have you there. We think it's going to be this really unique event. And they kind of skated the rules a little bit to make it happen. And talked with Tom, talked with our editors, and I was like, we got to get out here. And really, I think the story is the talent that was in town. I think if you look at the top 247 for the class of 2027, so that'd be the rising juniors. I think I added up like 24 of those guys were there. There'll be more top 247 recruits when we kind of roll out the 2028 rankings. And, I think a lot of fans and outsiders thought this would be geared towards the seniors, but talking with Matt Rule, some of the different people inside the buildings there. I mean, this was all about the underclassmen, and the big reason why is because Nebraska wanted to show off that new football facility. And I'm going to be honest, and maybe I'm wrong here. Like, I don't feel like there's been much publicity on a national level about this facility, this building that Nebraska has. Like, I got back to the hotel on Friday night. And I was kind of Googling and like, yeah, there's some video tours, but I don't think anyone like has come in and seen this thing. And me and Tom were both fortunate to kind of go on one of the tours with one of the 7-on-7 teams. And, I was blown away. Now, I haven't been to every place in the country, but I think for a player development program, right? That's what Nebraska is. I think we were talking with Rocco Spindler. He's like, yeah, this is an O-line program. And I thought that line stuck with me. But you think about Matt Rule, what he was able to do at Temple, what he was able to do at Baylor. Obviously, he was in the NFL. Like this facility, they have created something where if you're a player and, your goal is to make the NFL, and yeah, you're going to get paid through name, image, likeness, or revenue share. Like you do not have to leave the facility, right? The whole team eats together. It's the dining facility. I was amazed, right? And we saw the whole team in there. They had the official visitors in there. And then you go into the recovery, the locker room. I mean, they have hot tubs that are like as big as my pool. They got sleep pods. They have the indoor room where they can simulate on a screen. It's almost 100 yards wide, different plays and different looks. I think they call it the walkthrough room. And then that bleeds into, the weight room and the indoor practice facility. I know there's a title on it. I apologize. I'm not that versed in Nebraska football, but they've done some tweaks there and the branding in there. So I just thought the facility, like talking with different 7-on-7 coaches and prospects, a lot of them were saying, hey, this is the best I've ever seen. And I think, Nebraska, the line I've been using is like, hey, you build it, they'll come. I think that rings true. Like Nebraska, they got to find ways to get these guys there to see the facilities because it's probably better than a lot of NFL organizations And it's probably going to stay that way, right? With how college football has transitioned, it's no longer a facilities race, right? You're trying to use your money elsewhere. And Nebraska's kind of got in at the buzzer. And I was just blown away by the infrastructure there.
You're obviously pretty tied in with 7-on-7 programs. I mean, what was kind of the feedback that you heard from guys on Friday just to that whole setting? Because we hear a lot, kids come and visit. No, it's not just cornfields like I thought it was, that kind of thing. What were you kind of hearing, I guess, initially, kind of first blush from those kids when they went through that thing?
I know he's not a 7-on-7 player, but Mark Matthews, a potential 5-star in the 2027 cycle. I was chatting it up with him. I'm just familiar with him, a kid out of South Florida. He's like, this is like the best facility I've ever seen. One of the coaches for Raw, I mean, this is a guy who's been around the country. He was saying, this is better than Alabama. I haven't been to Oregon, but and I think it's important that those type of people think it as well, because they're the ones that are going to not like push kids to certain schools, but they're coming back home and around a bunch of blue chip prospects, and they're relaying the message that like, hey, Nebraska probably is a place that you need to check out. And to me, I mean, Nebraska is always going to have the opportunity to host official visitors. I just think that official visit can't be the first exposure point to that facility, right? So if you can get these kids in young, give them a reason to come back. So, I thought it was very positive, kind of everything that I'd heard. And then even talking with like some of the current players on the team, Ja'Cory Barney, bumped into him in the hallway. And, Ja'Cory Barney's a guy that some SEC schools made runs at here in the winter months. And he stayed at Nebraska. And I was like, Ja'Cory, man, I mean, obviously you're from Miami. Now you're here. Like, do you love it? And he's like, I don't leave this building, right? It's all about football. So, I think having those type of ambassadors, right, people that can carry the message is so, so important. And that's what makes the Battle of the Boneyard what it is. And I think for the teams that weren't there, there was enough buzz on social media that, hey, maybe some of these organizations that didn't play last year are going to want to be there. So I think they had a vision, maybe it didn't check every box, but I think overall huge success. And they can ride that momentum into, 2026, 2027, and 2028 and beyond, because a lot of high school coaches or 7-on-7 coaches are like, yeah, we're going to make this an annual stop for us.
So when I've been asked about it locally, I've kind of compared it to the idea of when satellite camps first hit. You saw that immediately after everyone was trying to do the same thing. When we get to next June, are we going to see a lot more programs attempting to host like a camp that has a 7-on-7 function to it?
Right.
And found the way through it.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Rule, program builder, innovator. And from my understanding, like he was a big guy pulling the strings behind the scenes on this. I think they wanted to do it last year and they were finally able to get it through this year. Yeah. I think other schools are going to attempt to do it, just kind of talking with different personnel people around the country. I know a lot of college coaches had their eyes on this event. They wanted to see how it would play out. Here's the thing though, like, I don't know if it's going to have the same effect at some of these other programs. Like if you have a 7-on-7 tournament with the club teams in Miami, like how is that much different than what we already have? I think Arizona State's a school where they could potentially try something like this. So I think people are going to try to copy it. The advantage, though, for Nebraska, again, is they have this facility, right? And, all the 7-on-7 teams, they got to tour the building. They ate with the team in the morning. So I think some people will certainly copy it. And you brought up the satellite camps. I mean, things have changed so much, not only in the past 10 years, but the past 5 years. Like getting kids to work out is becoming increasingly hard. I go back, I remember when Florida used to do their Friday night lights, like that was an elite event. Miami had their Paradise Camp. I know Nebraska had some of their stuff. I think this might be the future right now with the underclassmen. And the other thing that aside from, all these kids saw it, Nebraska measured everyone, right? And I think they flirted with the idea of testing them, but you got all that verified data on kids that usually aren't going to be walking through your doors for a spring practice in March or April.
One of those kids that was there, spent a lot of time in Lincoln over the last 10 days. Quarterback commit Trae Taylor. You've seen him in a number of different settings, 7-on-7, that kind of thing. I kind of heard coaches on the sidelines just, were kind of buzzing about him a little bit, just about how smooth he looked on Friday, the way that he kind of ran things for a team that he hadn't played with before, which was kind of impressive. But what did you make of his outing on Friday, and what do you kind of make of just kind of him as a commitment to kind of maybe build a class around in 27 for Nebraska?
Well, I thought it was the best I've ever seen from Trae Taylor in a non-padded setting. And, I've seen him play 7-on-7. I've seen him. He came down to the Under Armour camp in Miami. So I saw him go through one of those workouts. We watched him at Elite 11 regionals. I thought this was the best performance for him to date. And he's a kid that has been on the scene for a while, right? He's kind of a quarterback protege, a guy that had offers before he even started a high school game. For him to play with the Miami Raw organization, a playbook that, I was probably handed to him 5 minutes before the first game, not kicked off, but started. It was impressive. I thought he threw with a ton of anticipation. He was hardly late, went through his reads. I think once elimination play started on Friday night, right? So they had 3 games. I think I had him like 22 of 34 with 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And I'm not even sure I would score like a turnover-worthy pass. I thought he was dialed, efficient. And for Trae Taylor, kind of the sticking point, I was talking with someone about Nebraska, this kid went 4-7 as his first year as a starter at Mount Carmel. And the quarterback position, it's so important to be a winner. And so I kind of had this in my head when we put together our top 247 for the class of 2027, that initial one. It was like, I know the numbers on him, and it doesn't make me feel great. And then you watch the actual game tape, and I think it paints a completely different picture. This is a guy that moves very well in the pocket. He's got a natural feel for the position. He can get away from pressure. He can make some off-platform throws. He climbs forward and can still fire accurately down the field. So I'm buying more and more into Trae Taylor. He's also put on some good size. And then when you see him in person, it's like, he's kind of still baby face. Like, this is a kid. I think he's 6'3", 180 is the last we have. He's going to get to 200 pounds. And for Nebraska, I mean, the fact that they had him there is huge. And the fact that they have him committed this early. I know Nebraska, listen to your guys' podcast. I was listening on my drive from Omaha to Lincoln there, trying to navigate whatever highway that is. You guys mentioned it's probably going to be a smaller class for Nebraska in 2026. I think 2027 is the year you got to watch for them. We'll see what happens with Matt Rule in year 3, but you're getting Dylan Raiola in his second season, favorable schedule. If they challenge for 10 wins and Matt Rule, each of his stops year 3 has been the breakthrough year, 2027, they're going to have an opportunity to push for maybe the highest ranked recruiting class ever. And that's because Trae Taylor right now is leading the charge. He's recruiting guys like Mark Matthews and Ahmad Hudson. So I think the term you guys use is like the Pied Piper, but he has embraced the recruiting cap. And I saw that all weekend long. Like, we were going through the facilities, they got a swing simulator in there. It was him, Mark Matthews, and Ahmad Hudson. They didn't have golf clubs long enough for Ahmad Hudson, who is pushing 6'7", but those guys were all hanging out. So I think for Nebraska, not a lot of other 2027 quarterbacks are off the board. They got their guy right now, and he's recruiting, and I think that matters.
I want to ask you about Ahmad Hudson. Heard on Friday before the event had even started that Nebraska was in a good position because of previous visits and the relationships and everything that he had built there. And then he goes out, he's playing on the same team as Trae Taylor. I know Trae Taylor had been hitting him up, at least publicly on Twitter, and I'm sure a lot more privately. And that's a guy who had a monster day. So first, your kind of perspective of seeing Ahmad Hudson in that environment, and then also just sort of what you know about where a unique recruitment with a guy who also wants to play a little bit of basketball. And Fred Hoiberg hung out with him on Saturday and his family as well.
Well, go ahead. I mean, I do the freaks list every year, right? For every recruiting class. I think this will be year 4 or 5 for 2026. Just go ahead and you can put his name down in Sharpie for 2027. I mean, this guy is a freak, and he wasn't going to play. And then I think Trae Taylor kind of talked him into joining the Raw squad. The Raw coaches looked at me and they're like, hey, who is this kid? I'm like, well, he's the number one tight end in the class. And like, he is an absolute dude. I'm like, he's got 11-inch hands. And they're like, no, he doesn't. And then after the tournament, they're like, yeah, he does have 11-inch hands because he catches everything. So probably the best performance I've seen from a tight end since I've been doing this. And like, it's better than Darnell Washington, who's now with the Pittsburgh Steelers after being at Georgia, better than what he did at Miami's Legends camp like 6 years ago. I mean, it was unreal. He's a walking mismatch. He's a fluid mover. He's explosive in the sense of his ability to go up and get the football. Is he the fastest guy? Maybe we could see a little bit more there. But again, pushing 6'7", he's 231 pounds. And usually when you have these types of tight ends, they're guys that they just play out on the perimeter, right? They are jumbo wide receivers. You put on the tape from Ahmad Hudson, he is an inline blocker. And he brought up to me, he's like, my school likes to run the ball a lot. I mean, he still had, I think, 500 yards as a sophomore, but he can move people at the point of attack. So I think he's the real deal. He's going to be in the conversation for a fifth star whenever we get there for 2027. And I do think the Nebraska stuff is certainly real in his recruitment. Now, it's going to come down to the basketball stuff. And yeah, we hear it all the time. Guys want to play two sports in college. Not a lot actually do it. I think it's easier to play baseball and football than it is basketball and football. But hey, Trae Green, a true freshman at LSU, he did both this year for the Tigers. Kind of the same story, Trae to Ahmad Hudson from the same area. But here's the thing. I think Ahmad Hudson's got a higher ceiling as a football player. And talking with our basketball guys like Eric Bossi at 247 Sports, Ahmad Hudson's like a top 100 hoops player. I mean, this guy is a legitimate basketball talent. He's doing it on the AAU circuit. So I think the key is going to be, all right, who's legitimately going to entertain the idea of him playing both sports? And I mean, correct me if I'm getting wrong here, guys. Like, I think for Nebraska, it's a layup, no brainer, right? Like, they could use some help on the hardwood. Hey, we're not saying the kid's got to start, but just get him in that rotation. And then, maybe he gravitates more towards football at some point down the line. But the fact that they already got the basketball staff around him, the fact that this was his second or third visit, I mean, you got to think Nebraska is a legitimate player as it stands right now. And there's obviously still a ways to go.
I'm curious. I'm always curious when people from the outside kind of get a look at Nebraska and kind of get a sense for things there. What's your sense, I guess, of where Nebraska is kind of positioned in a post-house world? And kind of what, I mean, that's a big question, I understand, but I mean, what were kind of your impressions overall of just kind of the setup they have and certainly challenges? Obviously the results on the field haven't stacked up, but what do you kind of see for Nebraska, and kind of where they stand in this new era?
I think in this new era, like, they're in very good position to emerge as a contender in the Big Ten, right? You bring in GM Pat Stewart, who comes from the NFL. He understands the salary cap structure, right, and how to deal with transactional football, and that is what college football has emerged into. And I think the biggest thing for Pat in Nebraska is we're kind of waiting to see, all right, what is the settlement going to be? And I still think, we have some guardrails in place. We don't have all of them, right? I still think it's going to be a little bit evolving. But for Nebraska, to me, having been there, right, having seen it, having seen the complex, right, and spent some time in the town there, they got to get the right guys there. That is the biggest thing. So they have to identify the players that want to play on Sundays, right? The guys that love football, the guys that are going to buy into the process and Rule's track record for getting the most out of traits heavy players. It's up there with anyone else in the country. And I look at the visitors list over the weekend when it came to those official visitors. CJ Bronaugh, the cornerback that Nebraska was in super early, kid out of Orlando, top 247 recruit. Yeah, Florida's coming after him. Florida State's coming after him. Miami, Penn State, they've all been linked to CJ Bronaugh. If CJ Bronaugh is all about player development, like, Nebraska is going to win out, right? They're going to have the money to maybe match. It's going to come down to, does he want to be in that facility? And I again, I think Nebraska, just talking with his parents, they were on my flight out there. Like, I think they're giving him a lot to think about. Kelvin Obot, the offensive tackle out of Idaho, like, that's another guy to me that just kind of screams Nebraska. He needs the coaching. He needs to be living inside the facility. He's got a ton of traits. He's going to need some development. So how does Nebraska find those individuals? I think they're doing a good job. Cam Wilson, the defensive end that's committed to Syracuse, also on campus. We have him as a 3-star prospect. I sized him up in person. Yeah, maybe he's a little bit bigger. Maybe he should be ranked a little bit higher. But that's a kid that's a few years away. Now you drop him into the bucket there at Nebraska. You see what they've done with who are some of the young Florida guys that they got there? Vincent Shavers is one of them. McGahee. Like, it's an easy pitch to them. So I think for Nebraska, again, like, the infrastructure is there, and it's just going to be about getting the right guys that are there for the right reasons. And, again, I had a chance to talk with Matt Rule, like, his perspective on player retention. Like, I think they've set up an environment where kids are going to want to stay there. And I don't think they're going to, try to make it where kids can't leave. I mean, again, like, that team eats every meal together, or at least breakfast and lunch when they are in session and everyone's on campus. But it's not only that, they also got every person involved with football in there, like the relationships they built. That hot tub I talked about, that's the size of my swimming pool, probably even bigger. Like, Matt Rule says he spends a ton of time in there, right? And I think, they are going to want to create, or they are creating a space where, all right, like, kids want to be here. Now they got to win. They got to win in year 3. And, Dylan Raiola, I think he is the head of the snake. And I think he's kind of the forgotten man. And, what do I know? Like, he's not getting the hype that DJ Lagway is. He's not getting the hype that Arch Manning is. And it's like, guys, this is a former 5-star quarterback, right? And, there were some ups and downs, but I'll be honest, like, I thought Raiola in year 1 did better than I expected. So I'm excited to see what he does in year 2. And that was another takeaway, like, a lot of confidence in Dylan, who is really kind of like the head man there. He was super involved in the battle of the Boneyard. Everyone knows who he is. He has no issues going and talking with recruits. And I think Nebraska needed that. He is certainly the face of the program.
You mentioned just kind of the maybe overlooking of Raiola at this point among other sophomore quarterbacks. Did you get kind of the vibe over there that there's some quiet confidence about kind of what they have going into year 3?
Yeah, I think so. Like, Dane Key, the transfer wide receiver, is another name that came up. And, to me, Nebraska's changing defensive coordinators, right? And I know they made a change late in the season with the offensive coordinator. So it's not like everything is a ton of continuity. But the offensive lineman, like Rocco Spindler, Tom Loy has a great relationship with him. He was in the building getting some extra work in. And Rocco Spindler's a guy that came from Notre Dame who just made the college football playoff final. And, the sense I got from him talking in 20 minutes, and we covered a long list of things, is like, the reason he's at Nebraska is because he believes in player development, and he thinks that, this is the program that's going to help him blossom into an NFL draft pick. And him just kind of compare Notre Dame to Nebraska, you got the vibe that he thinks, the teams are kind of wired the right way. So that certainly stuck with me as well.
All right, Andrew, we appreciate, first of all, we appreciate you coming out, check out Nebraska. How did it change your perspective of what you thought Nebraska was? Were you surprised at all by short foray?
Yeah, 100%. And, my wife asked me that, my parents, because they're watching my kid. They're like, what'd you think? I was like, blown away, right? Blown away. And it's a trip I wanted to make, because Nebraska recruits the Sunshine State so much. And, a couple of years ago, I went up to Penn State, and it was more of a game day visit. but another program that's in Florida. And I think to understand like the dynamics and all the nuance that comes with the recruitments, like you kind of got to see it. Like what are they trying to accomplish here? How difficult is this? And, to fly from Orlando to Omaha really isn't that difficult. Rule also pointed out to me, I believe there's some direct flights from California to Omaha as well. Like it's an accessible place now. If the prospective student athletes, they want nightlife, they want fast cars and all that stuff. Hey, Nebraska's probably not the place for them. And I think Nebraska understands that again. So finding the right athletes, but no, I was blown away. Pretty cool how like the stadium is like right in the middle of the city. That was surprising to me. And I was also surprised by how many Nebraska students are Edmonton Oilers fans. We were watching game 2. I guess at a college bar. I didn't realize it was a college bar, and some kid turned to me and he's like, "Who are you cheering for?" I'm like, "Florida," and everyone was just all in on Edmonton. I didn't realize we were that close to Canada. I'm just going to put that out there.
Clearly, the proximity to Edmonton is really strong here. And
like,
where did you end up? Do you have any good food, anything like that?
Your guys' subscribers gave me a ton of good recommendations, and then honestly, like we just didn't have the time. I got in late on Thursday, and then I got out of there really, really early on Saturday morning. But for the town, like what's it, Haymarket? Like that's a pretty cool area. And when I first got in there, I saw Mark Matthews walking around. I'm like, hey, I know that kid. Like, that's probably a potential 5-star prospect in street clothes. So no, it was fun. And man, I'm ready to see Raiola, that Thursday night opener at Arrowhead Stadium. I think there's reason to be excited. And the last thing, right? You guys mentioned the 2026 recruiting class. Like Nebraska wins some games, they're going to have the opportunity to have a very heavy spatula and flip season. So I don't know if I'd be kind of panicking about where they are right now, knowing they're taking a smaller class.
All right, Andrew, we appreciate your time here today on the Husker247 podcast. So you can check out everything we have going on at Husker247.com. You can get all of our recruiting coverage. You can get Andrew's great work there as well. So for Andrew Ivins, for Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker247. We'll catch you next time.